Okay, so recently I added a 4-channel amp, and I really wasn't going to make a video about this, considering I already put up a video about how to add an amp that everyone seems to love so far. Unfortunately, I ran into so many problems, I was like, yeah, there might be some value in teaching people how to get this job done. So in this video, we're going to add a low output converter that's strong enough to power 2 amps. We're going to end up with a very efficient system with some high quality sound, so stay tuned. So here's an overall overview of what we're going to do today. Might look a bit overwhelming, but it's really just a few simple steps. So step 1, we're going to cut and splice into our stock wiring harness. Step 2, we're going to use those new taps to send out a signal to our low output converter. We're going to use that low output converter to send a signal to our 4-channel amp and our mono amp. We're then going to use that low output converter. We're going to use this to set our gains. Then we're going to use what's known as Speedwire to tap into our stock wiring harness so that we can use the stock wiring of the car to power all of our speakers rather than run new speaker wires throughout the whole car. From there, we just add our sub amp, and there our whole sound system is complete. Step 1 is to tap into your stock wiring harness. So coming out the gate, you're going to need to know which wire is which. I would suggest you just screenshot this image because you're going to come back to it a lot. From there, you're going to cut all of the speaker wires from your stock wiring harness. I personally use the Audiocontrol LC1i. If you go my route and you only tap the 2 channels, you're going to tap the front left speaker and the front right speaker. So from there, you're going to run your speaker wires all the way to the back of the car, and you want to input them into your low output converter. Here's the catch though. The Uconnect system is designed to not output a signal voltage if it does not read a load, meaning if it's disconnected from a speaker, it won't output a signal. And for the case of the Jeep, you're going to need some 47 ohm 5-watt resistors or just some 4 ohm resistors. Either way, you need at least 2 to replace your front 2 speakers. So the best way to go about this would be to just solder this outside the car, but you're basically just going to run one side to the negative, one side to the positive, and yes. So regarding the LC1, once the speaker lines are in, this actually already has a load input selector. So I don't have to actually wire the resistors into the system. I just hit this switch and they'll do the same thing. For power and ground, all you need to do is really just splice into your your amps power and ground. So power here, put a 1 amp inline fuse on it, tied into the power line, and for the ground, do the same thing. And from there, you should get your system to turn on and should start putting out a remote out function. This is your 12 volt that you're going to use and splice into your 12 volt on the amp, and then you're going to use it basically like a jumper to the other amp, and you see they both should cut on. So now that you have your 47 ohm resistors wired into the system, you should now be able to output the signal from the head unit out to the low output converter. This is when we're going to start converting our high level outputs into low level outputs. So when it comes to setting the gains on the Uconnect head unit, one thing I found out is that the USB input and the Bluetooth input put out dramatically different voltages. So the best way to set the gain on this is actually to use Bluetooth, because this was the one that uses the full power of the head unit. So the head unit is clean from 0 all the way to 38 on the volume. I figured this out using one of my amps that has a distortion detector. Basically, you're going to turn the head unit all the way to 38. You're going to run a 0 decibel test tone, and then you're going to try to change the output of your low output converter using the knobs that are on top of the faceplate. So what we're aiming for is a voltage of about 4 volts, because this is where a good head unit would be. So to test this, you will grab your multimeter and grab your positive lead, and you will put it inside the RCA output, and then you will run your negative lead on the outside of the RCA input. From here, you would then turn the knob until you get an output of 4 volts. If you have one that has 2 knobs, you just do each side separately. We're then going to use this signal to feed our 4-channel amps. Once you set the gain on this LC1 or your high output converter, you then take your RCA outputs and plug them into your highs amp right here. And also, there's a 4-channel input button set to 2 channels. This means they will copy all the inputs that are on the first 2 channels to the 3 or 4 channels. That way you don't need to run 4 RCAs. But every amp should have a pass-through function right here. You then use that same pass-through function to run another set of RCAs into the input of your other amp. Now your high output converter is putting out a voltage strong enough to supply both the highs amp and the lows amp with the frequencies that you need. So now it's time to set the gains on our amp. For our highs amp, we're going to use a negative 5 decibel 1 kilohertz tone, and for our low amp, we're going to use a negative 10 decibel 40 hertz tone. So what we're going to use our multimeter. We're going to try to get an output voltage that is equal to our amps rated power. So to find out this voltage, we would go watts times ohms and then find the square root of that number. From there, we could begin wiring up our speakers. And with the speed wire, we could just pull that towards the back. Once you get your speed wire back here, remember to take a note of which wire is which. And once your gains are set, you just plug them in like you do any other speaker wire. Plug in your sub amp and you're good to go. Make sure all your filters are on. Set them all to 80 hertz. From here, you should be able to turn your radio all the way up, play all your music, and get minimal clipping. Look, no clipping indicators, nothing. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything sounding good, sounding real clean, and yeah, man, I really hope I help. You know, the same old. If you learn something, like and subscribe. Stay tuned, because I will be soundproofing this car down the road.